Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Caroline Eifel's former president and director counsel of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and the founding director of Howard University's new 14th Amendment Center for Law and Democracy. She also informally consulted on the Colorado case to disqualify Donald Trump from the ballot, and she joins me now. I don't want to make too much, Sherilyn, of one poll that was a snap poll taken just in reaction. But in some ways, I think it's instructive because it's sort of a first thought, best thought kind of thing. Like, it comes down, what do you think? And I'm curious your reaction to that, saying that 54% of voters approve, 33 disapprove of a decision that I think in the mainstream discourse has been far more contentious.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. You know, of course, I'm heartened that a majority of those polled said that they approved of the decision. The folks that you interviewed, that your team interviewed, who said, you know, it won't change my mind, it's just a setup, they're still just charges, and all the things they've said about the other cases involving President Trump. You know, it's very much like what people would say maybe in, you know, the neighborhood next over from me about someone who was arrested and accused of being a drug kingpin. People who've seen that person in the neighborhood, who liked that person who handed out turkeys on Thanksgiving, who was a funny person and engaged with people, would say all of those things. So that doesn't trouble me that there are people who are saying, I'm still with him. I think it's good that a majority of people are hearing this and feeling like there is something there. The good news about Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is that it's easy to read. There's really nothing confusing about the language. That's my first reaction. The second reaction, Chris, is I don't care. We don't put questions of legality or eligibility for the ballot to polls. These are the words of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment of the Constitution. We don't run a poll on whether if Donald Trump said he was 34 years old, or if he didn't continuously live in the United States for 14 years, which is another requirement. We don't put that to a plebiscite. Those are the qualifications for those seeking this office. And the reason it's so important, Section 3, which is, comes to us after the Civil War, is that those framers, Chris, had looked insurrectionists in the eye. They had faced a divided and broken country. They had seen the ultimate in white supremacist ideology. And Section 3 was included precisely because they understood the danger of these two strains in American life to undo the possibility of the new democracy that was being created after the Civil War. And I think for the last 5 years, so many people have been throwing up their hands saying, we've never seen anything like this. What can we do to stop someone like Donald Trump? Yes, it's true. We haven't had to deal with this since the Civil War. Thank goodness, because most of our presidents, all of our presidents, save one, have not tried to overthrow the legitimate election of their successor. But The framers of the 14th Amendment created tools for us to be able to deal with the possibility that there would be those who would be in this position. And the simple phrase tells us that what they're saying is that if you are disloyal to the Constitution of the United States, having once taken office and taken an oath of office in the past, and then engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or having provided aid and comfort to those who did engage in insurrection or rebellion against the Constitution, you are ineligible for public office at either the state or the federal level. It's perfectly logical. It's there. It was created by these framers. And I think it's very easy for people to understand.
You know, one of the things that it has been a recurring theme of this era, right, is that Trump pushes against every boundary around him and sees how far he can go, right? And one of the things I've thought about actually in the wake of this, and this has been occasioned by a few people making this point, it is interesting, right? We talk about the 34-year-old or someone who is, not a U.S. citizen or not a natural-born citizen, right? Like, clearly, like, you couldn't put a 20-year-old on the ballot for president, right? We all understand that. And the thought I had was, as you watch this sort of interesting granular question of like, oh, well, how does this actually work, right? State by state. And in Maine, the Secretary of State's going to decide. And in Colorado, the voters can sue. And I had the thought of, well, what if someone, Donald Trump, for instance, wanted to seek a third term? Clearly, the Constitution says he can't. And clearly you could say, well, it would be anti-democratic to not have him on the ballot. I mean, the people should decide. But no, actually, in the Constitution, you're right. In the Constitution, we're just sorry. We're just clear about that. But then the question becomes like, right, when the rubber hits the road, if a certain person says, I'm running for a third term, it turns out it's just going to be a test of the same sets of institutions and laws, right? That whether they can say, no, you can't.
Exactly. And this decision by the Colorado Supreme Court is incredibly thorough, goes through all the evidence. This is a court that understands what the stakes are. It will head to the Supreme Court. And as I've said in the past, this is really going to be a test for the Supreme Court because the plain text of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is very clear. The findings of the trial court and the affirmation by the Colorado Supreme Court are very clear and well-founded. The dissenters in the Colorado Supreme Court case dissent on grounds that have to do with Colorado state law. And for your viewers who don't know, a state's highest court is the last word on the interpretation of that state's local laws, that state's laws. So the Supreme Court's not really in a position to overturn on the grounds that the dissenters in the case dissented. So this is going to be a real test for them. There are people who've suggested that we're naive to think that they will do the right thing and uphold this. That's not really why we file cases. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I don't file a case thinking the Supreme Court's definitely going to rule my way. You file a case because you have a legal claim that must be vindicated. And this is critically important. We so often ignore the 14th Amendment when it is central to our ability to create a healthy democracy. And at our peril, we have ignored sections of it. We have distorted it. We have upended it. We have used it for ends that it was not meant for. But this section of the 14th Amendment was meant precisely for the occasion in which we would find ourselves now. And by the way, it doesn't just apply to Donald Trump. So I hope that all those other insurrectionists who are holding office or planning to run for re-election, I hope they're sleeping a little more fitfully after this Colorado Supreme Court ruling, because it's not over.
Yeah, and I should note here, Judge Michael Luttig, who has become a very vocal Trump critic and was a sort of legendary conservative, real conservative jurist. He was set on the federal appeals court before he left. He was in the short list to be a Supreme Court justice. He says that he said it's the opposite of politics, this ruling, that the Constitution itself tells us that disqualification of the former president is not anti-democratic. Rather, it tells us it's the conduct that gave rise to disqualification under the 14th that is anti-democratic. Final question for you is on the second point here about the sort of necessity of there's the 14th Amendment, Section 3, and then there's also, will the legal system be allowed to run its course and have a full trial before a jury with full constitutional rights and due process of this man in time so that people can judge, who they are voting for.
Yeah. So I want to separate this out because there are so many cases. You're right. There is the criminal case. We have Jack Smith's case. We also have, the LDF KKK Act case that got a huge boost today with the finding of phone calls with Trump and Wayne County canvassers in 2020. And so we've got a lot of different things going on that need to move through the system. But, this is still a test for the Supreme Court because they're going to have to make a decision about the very question that you're asking me. They have to ask themselves. In a democratic system, don't the voters have the right to know whether this person is in fact guilty of the crimes of which he's accused or not before they vote in that election? Now, the Supreme Court can engage in sleight of hand. I mean, I could imagine them trying to resuscitate that Purcell doctrine that says we don't change things about an election too close to an election. I mean, it would be outrageous to take a shadow docket decision and use it in this way, but I would not put it past them. They may say on the Section 3 case that there needs to be enabling legislation by Congress to remove someone from the ballot. I mean, there are a million ways I think they will try to avoid this because, Chris, there is no way, looking at the text, at the history, at the intention of the provision, at the trial court record, at the decision of the Colorado Supreme Court, that just on the legality, not on the politics, just on the legality, you could strike down that decision. So that's the Colorado Supreme Court decision. The other cases are those criminal cases that need to move. Jack Smith is trying to move directly to the Supreme Court. I can't think of a rational or even legal reason why they would not accept that expeditious hearing and turn it back to the Court of Appeals. And so I think the Supreme Court is in a tough spot. Of course, they're the 800-pound gorilla. They get to do whatever they want. But every time they depart from what is plainly the correct legal course by the rules that they have created and upheld, every time they depart from that, they further undercut their legitimacy and they lay the groundwork for the changes that will happen to the structure of the Supreme Court in the coming years. I'm sure those changes will happen, but they will happen more readily and with more public support the more the court is perceived as departing from its own standards and from standards of legitimacy.
It is Friday, the 22nd of December of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Okay, well, nostalgia reigns because, I don't know, that's what they say. It rains. And does that means that it's lording over us, or we're being deluged? I think we're being deluged. Okay, well, do we have some stories and for you to mull over here in the Bistro Cafe and also at the chef's table later on today, as we have, well, the last Friday before Christmas. I see a lot of people getting stressed about Christmas. Now look, it's supposed to be about peace, goodwill, joy, not stress, joy. Okay? So, I don't know, somewhere along the line, people thought, well, I don't know, the prosperity gospel says we have to be conspicuous. And I keep telling people, no, that's not joy. Come on, it's certainly not peace or goodwill. Put the prosperity gospel down and here, have a hot toddy or a cup of cocoa. Hot toddy's a little too, I don't know, you know what I mean. Then have some hot cocoa. Oh, boy. And we're winding down on 2023. Yes, we are moving into another year. Another year of what? Well, I don't need to tell you. You already know. It looks like old Donnie Trump has decided to not appeal the Colorado ruling until after Christmas, because that's how important it is to him. And I don't know, on the other hand, maybe his lawyer said, look, mofo, we're not working. We are going home. We're going to have peace, goodwill, and joy, something that Trump knows nothing about. And that's what they're going to do. And maybe even Donnie Trump, he probably had some big bash, or he does, he does, a big bash at Mar-a-Lago, and he can't miss that. Jesus. All right. I don't know why he would have to miss it anyway, but I really think it's that his D-team, D-list lawyers, they just said, forget you. We're not working on Christmas. All right. That could be it. Or he's just putting off the inevitable. The guy's all about delaying until people give up, and I don't think they're going to give up this time. Nope, not one whit. So that could, we still have more Christmas presents that we're opening up here. Some of us open our Christmas presents early. This tape coming out of Michigan of Trump on the phone haranguing like canvassers, like individual small fry. It's amazing. Perfectly corrupt phone calls, I gotta tell you. And we all know that this Raffensperger call was not the first one. The reason Raffensperger taped it because it wasn't only he that was being harangued constantly by this guy and his team. And it wasn't just other people in his administration or in the state that were being harangued in a similar fashion. It was his friends in other states that were telling him about what was happening to them. So we all know this from way back, but it's just interesting that, the tapes are coming out, and good thing. Because that is a Christmas present. Merry Christmas. Or, if you want to have a little bit of punk added to it, I like to say Merry Savage Christmas. Open up your present, Donnie. Now, yesterday I spoke about how Vlad and his crew helped Trump win in 2016 by going granular in 3 counties, or was it 2 counties? Yeah, 3 counties, and 3 counties over 2 states. That's how it worked. Where they were able to focus in on, misinformation, fake news, convincing people they shouldn't go and vote, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Telling people that Hillary was, Satan's daughter and eating babies at Comet Pizza, in the basement of Comet Pizza. Whatever it took. I mentioned that they went down on the granular level, and how was the FSB able to do that was because there were people who gave them, Donnie Trump and Jared and others, gave them voting rolls and all sorts of other types of information, and the FSB and the Russians were able to use it, and it got granular. So when I said granular, I meant that they went down to like the county level. Well, old Donnie Trump, he's coming down even more granular than county. He's like individual canvassers. So maybe he got help back from the Ruskies. I don't know. But it ain't kosher. It sure isn't. It stinks to high heaven. Perfect corrupt phone calls. And what will John Roberts and the rest of this crew do? Oh, they're gonna heel to the letter of the law, aren't they? Sure they are. Textualism and originalism is gonna go right out the window with states' rights. Let's not forget. Whatever it takes. Stare decisis, yeah, you're out of here. we knew about how we've known for quite some time how they feel about stare decisis. They just make it up as they go along. They don't care what even they said before. So the Colorado court citing Gorsuch, he doesn't care. That's not precedent. I can't be expected to hold true to what I've said before. Hell, they all lied during the confirmation. Look where we are. Dobbs. Which brings me to Ken Paxton and his group and Abbott and their group. And I know that we have a story coming up about what they're doing, but I just want to mention all of it is part of a whole. They're going after trans kids and they're going after women, and this is all part of a terror campaign, and we know it. So it's about time it stopped. And you know how it gets stopped? Well, we have the ballot, don't we? Uh-huh. And we also have the law. And when lawmakers break the law, you know what they say? There is no law. And I would argue, yes, there is. Because just because a lawmaker is breaking the law doesn't mean that the law does not apply to them, because we will make it so. And when I say we, I mean, yeah, sounds romantic, quaint, but it's true. It's we, the people. Mm-hmm. Okay. It is delicious, though, how they take the Second Amendment and they just completely ignore that well-regulated militia part. Storing your weapons at an armory and then mustering and then getting them during the muster. So they have to actually pervert the Second Amendment to make it is to what we know now. I mean, even the idea of corporate personhood was just a footnote on the margins of a document that was just a note. And that's now been picked up and put into law. Oh, yeah, corporations are people, my friend, right here. Southern Pacific versus, what was it? Was it California? No, I think it was one of the counties there. Coastal California. Anyway. But we will cite the 14th Amendment. There's nothing changed. And in fact, they have the actual deliberations of the guys who are writing the 14th Amendment. The back and forth. So you want to know about textualism? Here's your textualism. You want to know about originalism? Here's your originalism. Yeah, well, that's not going to matter because the MAGA court are political actors and they were put there to be so. Okay. They have to corrupt, and we follow the law, and apparently we're the scourge of the world. Yeah, I like how that works. All right, we've pontificated enough right before a religious holiday, too, and don't ever convince me that it's not. Because it is. It could be a consumerist holiday, and look, they can be many, many things. And in fact, we're going to get into it in some of this and what we have in store for you on this fine Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because as we begin, well, we already began with that Colorado ruling being a warning to other pro-coup lawmakers that it is not over and we're coming for you too. That's what we're trying to say here in our convoluted way. All right, on the rest of the menu, the Huntington Beach, California City Council will remove Black History Month, Women's History Month, and Pride Month, among others, for their 2024 celebration calendar to make room for their new celebrations that will be, quote, free of any identity politics and political agendas, end quote, that they don't like. God, these guys. I will say that there's many in the population that are pretty upset about this, but we'll get into it when we get into it. Yes, this is the one I alluded to earlier about Ken Paxton. Well, Seattle Children's Hospital sued Ken Paxton after he ordered them. Now, he's the Texas Attorney General. He ordered a Seattle hospital, a Seattle, Washington hospital, to hand over all their records of trans kids. What? And a federal judge hearing a challenge to Florida's anti-trans law noted DeSantis repeatedly spread false information about doctors mutilating children. Now that's a defamation suit. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Pakistan authorities arrested over 200 activists to stop them from protesting in Islamabad. About what? They're protesting against extrajudicial killings. Got to stop that. I mean the extrajudicial killings, but these guys want to stop the protests about it. And Fat Leonard has landed back in a U.S. federal court and could face more charges. Well, yeah, he cut off his ankle bracelet and escaped. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link. The chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so and everything else that she does. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help us. Well, we find out that when we pay our bills, we're able to fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance, and we've been able to do so because of the generosity of folks like you. If you could, like them, afford to send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it really does help us pay those bills and all the other costs because they keep rising, and you know how that is. Yeah, so hardly ever comes down. In fact, they never, at least in this realm of industry. But nonetheless, thank you for your generosity. And I know it's tough times right now at this time of year because of all the other, priorities and where money goes. But when you can, your generosity is greatly appreciated. And we thank those who have been so generous over these many years in allowing us to fulfill our civic duty as the founders originally intended so many, 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 many years ago. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, you can do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those, and we all take care of Facebook because that's how it works. We all do. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, yada, at Justice Putnam. And for those of you who don't know, because it's possible that you don't know that I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes 10 minutes before showtime. So you have quick access to those show notes and links diaries when you follow my social media feeds. And then you can read the actual articles by the actual reporters who went to journalism school, too, to be what they are. All right. Now, I just took a few classes. Okay. We are not experts, but we have, some opinions, some insights. Yes, indeed. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do that by going to @CookbookWest. And most importantly, if you would pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., 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 that would be equally grand. I must inform you, you can pick them up most anywhere podcasts, wherever podcasts are available. They're just not available on Stitcher. Okay. Got it out. My little Christmas present to myself. An early one. Okay. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of the Los Angeles Times by Matt Szabo. Now, February's city theme for Huntington Beach will be We Love Our Libraries in 2024, while the city will make no mention of Black History Month. In June, the city theme will be focused on the history of Independence Day in June. But the city will not be recognizing Pride Month. Nope, no rainbow flags for you. The council voted 4-3 on Tuesday night to approve a 12-month calendar that will see each month dedicated to a specific theme, but would remove other familiar months from the recognition list. The item, introduced by Mayor Gracie Vandermark, Mayor Pro Tem Pat Burns, and Councilman Casey McKeon, states that it is designed to honor the rich historic heritage of the country, state, and Surf City itself. Each month's theme will highlight significant events, landmarks, and influential figures, except for the ones we're all familiar with in the federal holiday calendar. Tony Strickland voted to approve the item, while Dan Kalmick, Natalie Moser, and Rhonda Bolton all voted no. McKeon said that over the past year, city archivist and historian Kathy Shea has sent him about 20 chronological photos of the history of Huntington Beach that he has hanging in his council office. Myself, as a third-generation Huntington Beach resident, I've just been amazed to learn how much of our rich history that I was unaware of. 3 generations, and he doesn't know this stuff. Well, let's see what he doesn't know of. He continued, I can only imagine the majority of our residents are unaware of as well, McCann said. Yeah, because they're paying too much attention to Black History Month. Uh-huh. That was essentially the genesis for this calendar of historically themed months. The monthly celebrations now are fragmented, inconsistent, and relatively unorganized within the departments. But Shea, earlier in the meeting during public comments, said she would be resigning as the chair of the Historic Resources Board and as member of the Design Review Board in protest of the item. That's the historian that he's relying on. Another 7 to 9 member committee would be created to decide the calendar of events for each year, which she saw as usurping the power of the Historic Resources Board. I think is a pretty thinly veiled, stinging vote of no confidence, both in my role as a historian and leadership of the Historic Resources Board, Shea said. The members of that board include a history professor, 2 history authors, 2 of the great-grandsons of our first mayor, and this is unfair to them. The item states the committee could be assisted by the Historic Resources Board or city staff as needed. McCain said the board was not consulted before the item was put on the agenda, though he did have a conversation with historian Shea over the weekend. My God. Should I mention that these are MAGA city council members here? Now, the monthly themes for 2024, as proposed and amended Tuesday, include celebrating the city's origins and remembrance of the Holocaust in January, California's history in March, and the history of Huntington Beach's railroad in April. But the item also states that any previous monthly themes or celebrations approved by earlier city councils would be repealed and superseded. Now, October's theme for 2024 will be dedicated to a celebration known as Black Gold Jubilee, honoring the discovery of oil that for decades and decades and decades befouled the beaches of Surf City. Kim Bellware, Molly Hennessy Fisk, Timothy Bella, and Ben Brash of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton tried to compel a Seattle hospital to hand over information about gender-affirming treatment Texas youths may have received across state lines, according to court filings, signaling an escalation of his office's attempts to crack down on Texans' ability to access such care. The Seattle Children's Hospital requested a Texas judge nullify or at least rein in Paxton's demands, arguing that his office lacks the jurisdiction over the Washington State Hospital. In filings this month, the hospital said Paxton's queries, made under the guise of an investigation by the AG's Consumer Protection Division, were sham requests. Now, of course, we know that Paxton's office never responds to a request for comment, ever. A spokesperson for Seattle Children's Hospital declined to comment on the specifics of its legal action. In a statement, the spokesperson said the hospital complies with the law for all health care services and took legal action to protect private patient information related to gender-affirming care services at our organizations sought by the Texas Attorney General, end quote. Conservative lawmakers have driven efforts in recent years to criminalize gender-affirming care with laws similar to ones that restrict abortion access by creating legal liability for healthcare providers and the in-state portion of people's travel for out-of-state care. Now, when I mentioned earlier this is all part of a whole, Paxton is floating this anti-trans BS so that he can go after women for going out of state, and he wants to be able to sue hospitals in other states because of a war on women and everything decent in America. Farrington of the Associated Press brings us this last offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A federal judge hearing a challenge to a transgender healthcare ban for minors and restrictions for adults noted yesterday, Thursday, that Ron DeSantis repeatedly spread false information about doctors mutilating children's genitals, even though there's been no such documented cases. The law was sold as defending children from mutilation when it is actually about preventing trans children from getting health care, Judge Robert Hinkle said to Mohammed Jazel, a lawyer for the state. When I'm analyzing the governor's motivation, what should I make of these statements, Hinkle asked. This seems to be more than just hyperbole. Hinkle said he will rule sometime in the new year on whether the legislature, the Department of Health, and DeSantis deliberately targeted transgender people through the new law. He raised some skepticism about the state's motivation as lawyers gave their closing arguments. The trial is challenging Florida's ban on medical treatment for transgender children, such as hormone therapy or puberty blockers, a law DeSantis touted while seeking the presidency. The law also places restrictions on adult trans care. Jazel said the motivation behind the law was simply public safety in an area that needs more oversight and can have permanent consequences. It's about treating a medical condition. It's not about targeting transgender individuals, the lawyer said. Jazel added that if the state was targeting transgender people, it could have banned all treatment for adults and children. Hinkle quickly replied that Jazel would have trouble defending such a law. Hinkle, who was appointed by former President Bill Clinton, has temporarily blocked enforcement of the law as it pertains to minors pending the outcome of the trial. The lawsuit also challenges restrictions placed on adult trans care which have been allowed to take effect during the trial. At least 22 states have now enacted laws restricting or banning gender-affirming medical care for transgender minors, and many of those states face lawsuits. Courts have issued mixed rulings, with the nation's first law in Arkansas struck down by a federal judge who said the ban on care violated the due process rights of transgender youth and their families. Okay, that takes us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, way past Alice and the Wizard. A new project from Hayao Miyazaki is always an occasion, and his new and somewhat autobiographical The Boy and the Heron doesn't disappoint. A project 7 years in the making, it features Miyazaki's signature hand-drawn animation said to have proceeded at about a minute of production per month. The result, when viewed on the big screen, is like being inside a dynamic watercolor. The story set in wartime Japan, where 12-year-old Mahito loses his mother in an air raid. His father, a military industrialist, retreats to his late wife's sister's country estate with the traumatized Mahito. And yeah, Dad is now married to the sister, Natsuko, who is pregnant and subsequently disappears. It's here where he meets an array of characters, from Natsuko's wizened maids to the very strange talking heron who lures Mahito to an abandoned haunted tower on the property with promises of reuniting him with his mother. In the tower, Mahito sinks through the floor to the upside down, if you will, a conflictual world of variously allied or warring factions of weird human, animal, and miscellaneous, for lack of a better term, beings, and edifices through which he must navigate. In this upside-down, Mahito finds Natsuko in a delivery room, a Freudian touch, but only a sample of the symbolism permeating this one. Part of Miyazaki's wisdom is to leave a lot to interpretation. It's a coming-of-age story, to be sure, but an expansive one encompassing finding one's place between ancestors and descendants, choosing the comfort of fantasy or the reality of life, and being resilient in the face of conflict and uncertainty. The Boy and the Heron is one not to miss, but animated or not, leave the kids at home. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
He seems sorry.
We very clearly told him not to look up there.
I'm honestly impressed that he was able to do it.
Right? What did he balance on that big chair?
Yeah, I mean, I guess he'll just know what his gifts are this year.
I really thought we had hidden them well.
If they can find their presents, they can find a gun.
911, what is your emergency?
Every day, 8 kids and teens are unintentionally killed or injured by loaded and unlocked guns. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and End Family Fire.
I'm probably okay to have one more drink before I drive home. I'm probably okay. I open the window to stay alert. Probably okay. I just popped some gum in my mouth.
Step out of the car, please.
I probably made a mistake.
Probably okay isn't okay when it comes to drinking and driving. If you see a warning sign, stop and call a cab, a car, or a friend. Buzzed driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. A 2021 Kansas law, HB 2183, made impersonating an election official a felony, but its vague language unintentionally or intentionally swept up voter registration groups like the League of Women Voters, stopping registration efforts. A Kansas Supreme Court ruling December 15th gives standing to the democracy groups challenging the law. The 2021 passage of HB 2183 virtually stopped third-party registration drives. Pro-voter group Loud Light, speaking to the Kansas Reflector, said the group may have missed the opportunity to register thousands of Kansans. They and other pro-voter plaintiffs sued in 2021, but a district court said they had no standing to bring the case. An appeals court overturned the no standing portion of the ruling, but also affirmed voting as a fundamental right for Kansans, concluding, "Thus, voting rights are preserved in the Kansas Constitution. Great care must be taken when trying to limit or infringe on those rights. Voting was important then, voting is important now." Refusing to give up on the voter suppression law, Kansas Attorney General Chris Kobach appealed it to the state Supreme Court. The Kansas High Court's ruling doesn't overturn the law, but affirmed HB 2183 was so vaguely written that it justified the plaintiff's standing and allowed the case to proceed. We'll have more in the coming months. We have the court opinions and the groups taking action at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 2008. That was the day that Walmart stores agreed to settle 63 wage and hour lawsuits across 42 states for at least $352 million and possibly as much as $640 million. Walmart and Sam's Clubs were accused of failing to pay overtime, requiring workers to work off the clock, erasing hours from time cards, and preventing workers from taking meal and rest breaks as guaranteed guaranteed by state law. The lawsuits involved hundreds of thousands of then current and former employees. You'd think they would have learned their lesson after having to shell out that amount of money. In fact, they have had to settle at least 7 more class action wage and hour lawsuits and remain a defendant in dozens more. By 2012, Walmart had settled at least 9 Equal Employment Opportunity Commission cases related to disability, gender, racial and religious discrimination in hiring, and sexual harassment. Egregious labor violations have persisted throughout their stores. Systematic wage theft, health and safety dangers, and abusive conditions on the job have continued for years. Chronic short staffing creates unsafe working conditions. In 2012 alone, they were repeatedly cited and fined by OSHA for serious violations such as blocked emergency exits, lack of safety procedures for control of power hazards, and other problems. Employees who worked with our Walmart organizers often found they were targeted with threats, reduction in hours, and terminations. More recently, Walmart has had to settle a discrimination suit over health insurance benefits for same-sex spouses. The high cost of labor violations and the low wages at Walmart cost taxpayers on average $6.2 billion a year in public assistance for many of their workers.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only around 45 to 46 today. We are currently under foggy conditions and expecting showers in just about an hour or so, then partly cloudy with rain in the afternoon, winds light and variable, looking for about a quarter-inch of rain today and into tonight. And then later on this evening will be clear to partly cloudy with lows in the mid to upper 20s. Winds light and variable. Then a few clouds early tomorrow, Saturday. Otherwise mostly sunny. Highs once again in the mid-40s. Winds light and variable. And it looks like we'll have similar conditions on Sunday. Sunny Sunday. And then some more rain on Christmas Day. Pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 20 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 1. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.11 inches. Visibility is at 1.5 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 54 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 51 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 56 degrees and clear. Bagram is 45 and cloudy. Kiev is 35 degrees and cloudy. Hong Kong is 54 and fair. Tokyo is 38 degrees and clear. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 58 and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees and mostly cloudy with a coastal flood watch where high tide will be about 2 feet over its usual. Chicago, Illinois is 44 degrees and cloudy, and New York is 31 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Munir Ahmed of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Pakistan's police used water cannons, swung batons, and arrested dozens and dozens of activists in an overnight crackdown to stop protesters from entering the capital to denounce the forced disappearance and extrajudicial killings in the militancy-ravaged Southwest. About 200 protesters, some of them families with children, began their nearly 1,600-kilometer, which is a 1,000-mile convoy around November 28th, heading toward Islamabad from the town of Turbet. They plan to rally in the capital to draw attention to the death of Balak Mollah Bakhsh. The 24-year-old died in November while in police custody in the Balochistan province. Police say Bakhsh was carrying explosives when he was arrested in November, and 2 days later he died when militants ambushed a police van that was transporting him. Activists say police were holding him since they arrested him in October and suspect he was intentionally killed in a staged counterterrorism operation. Such arrests by security forces are common in the region and elsewhere, and people who are missing are often found to have been in custody of authorities, sometimes for years. Since then, human rights activists and his family have been demanding justice for him. They also want the counterterrorism officials who they claim killed the man arrested. The gas-rich southwestern Balochistan province at the border of Afghanistan and Iran has been the scene of a low-level insurgency by Baloch nationalists for more than 2 decades. The nationalists initially wanted a share from the provincial resources, but later initiated an insurgency for independence. They also say security forces have been holding hundreds of their supporters for the past several years.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Joshua Goodman and Eric Tucker of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A defense contractor at the center of one of the biggest bribery scandals in U.S. military history is expected to face additional charges following his return to the U.S. from Venezuela as part of a broader prisoner swap between the two countries. Leonard Glenn Francis, who is nicknamed Fat Leonard, faced a federal judge for the first time since snipping off his ankle monitor last year and disappearing weeks before a sentencing hearing on charges that he offered more than $500,000 in cash bribes to Navy officials defense contractors, and others. He was later arrested in Venezuela and has been in custody there since, but was returned to the U.S. in a large swap on Wednesday that also saw the release of 10 American detainees by Venezuela in exchange for the Biden administration freeing Alex Saab, a Colombian-born businessman and close ally of Maduro, who had been charged in the U.S. in a money laundering case. Francis, shackled and in a beige jumpsuit, stood quietly by as a federal magistrate judge in Miami ordered him to be transferred to the Southern District of California, the region where his case was initially filed. Prosecutors said additional charges would be presented against Francis for failing to appear at a hearing in his ongoing bribery case in San Diego. Francis was arrested in a San Diego hotel nearly a decade ago as part of a federal sting operation. Investigators say he bilked the U.S. military out of more than $35 million by buying off dozens of top-ranking Navy officers with booze, sex, lavish parties, and other gifts. The scandal led to the conviction and sentencing of nearly 24 Navy officials, defense contractors, and others on various fraud and corruption charges. He pleaded guilty in 2015 and was allowed to stay out of jail at a rental home on house arrest with a GPS ankle monitor and security guards. But weeks before he faced sentencing in September of 2022, Francis made a daring escape as he cut off his ankle monitor and disappeared. Officials said he fled to Mexico, made his way to Cuba, and eventually got to Venezuela. He was arrested a couple of weeks later before boarding a flight to Simón Bolívar International Airport outside Caracas. Venezuela officials said he intended to reach Russia. He had been in custody in Venezuela ever since, and officials said he did seek asylum there. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will be taking Christmas Day off, so we'll be meeting up here on Tuesday for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays, so do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all holiday weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Tuesday, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-dee-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.